Hi, and thanks for watching. This is the third video in a series introducing the internal arts. Last video, we looked at a practical perspective on Qi. In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about what does it mean to train the Qi. So we're talking about Qigong, Qi training. Sometimes another parallel idea is the idea of neigong, internal training, building internal skill, building internal power. What is that about? And especially I wanted to use a comparison contrasting it with other types of physical training and see how they're different, so it helps us understand. So like I mentioned in the previous video, to understand the Qi is to understand the felt experience of doing these activities. It's the engagement of our mind and with the physical movement, posture, alignment, and sensation. That is what creates the sensation of the Qi. It's what brings us our awareness of the Qi. One useful detail about Qi, a standard sort of definition that might help clarify things, is the understanding that Qi is not something that is visible directly. We can only be aware of it by its effects and its function. Parallel to this is like going up to someone and asking them, well, is it windy out today? Of course, they go and they look out the window and they say, oh, yeah, today it's windy. Now, of course, they're not seeing the wind directly. They look out the window and they see the trees, and the trees are moving, and they see the neighbor's garbage can being blown down the street, and they say, oh, from these effects, I can indirectly tell that there is wind moving outside. This is a similar idea in terms of Qi and its effects. It is something that we are aware of indirectly by the sensation that it brings when we're doing certain practices like Qigong and Tai Chi, Bagua Xingyi. But of course, the mindset is an important part of this. So this is where I want to contrast it with, say, lifting weights for training and exercising our muscles, compared to Qigong, which is exercising the Qi. When we're doing a standard physical activity, say it's a racket sport, or if we're in the gym and lifting weights, it tends to be something where the mind directs the body. The mind says the message, grab the weight and lift it up, and then slowly put it back down. Right? And so the mind sends the message and the body responds. And in that response, the muscles become trained. Qigong almost entirely flips this on its head and does the reverse, and says what takes the lead is the movement and the body. And that sends the signal to the brain and the cognition, which senses that movement, and that has the effect. So, for example, if the Qigong movement is this, then our sensation of it is, oh, it feels like something that's opening and spreading out. And if the Qigong movement is then this, then we say, oh, that has a feeling of gathering in and settling down. And this interaction between the movement and our sensing of it is the dynamic that generates and trains the Qi. This helps to explain why with the internal arts, the training tends to be quite different than, say, an aerobics class. It tends to be quieter, it tends to be slower, it tends to be more mindful, because of this idea that the training of the Qi and the development of the Qi requires this interplay and engagement of primarily the movement and the body, which is then has an effect on our thoughts and feelings. Now, there is also, I wanted to mention about the purpose of our training. And it's very standard to look at the training of the Qi, the neigong practices, and put them into there's sort of three broad schools or three broad categories. They say it's done for purposes of health, It's done for martial purposes or it's done for religious purposes. This is especially true for Qigong, different Qigong styles, but I think you'll find that there's elements of this that show up in all of the internal arts. And what I wanted to suggest at this point is suggest a fourth, more fundamental category, and that is the internal training, which is done simply for the purpose of itself. The Qigong is done for the purposes of doing Qigong. And of course, this is borrowing from ideas around meditation, where the purpose of meditation is simply to meditate. As a side benefit of that, you may end up calmer, more self-aware, maybe even enlightened, but that is not the purpose of meditation. And by the same token, you can look at Qigong as something where it is also without a direct purpose. It doesn't mean that you can't apply a purpose to it. You want to have better sleep. You can find ways of doing Qigong for better sleep, for example, or for greater martial skill, or etc., etc. My thought around it, at least at this point, is that while this is possible, it ends up providing you with a much more narrow end of effects, and I speculate, I wonder, whether or not it also requires much more effort to get those effects, those benefits. And so my suggestion is to consider this change of perspective of Qigong, which really is a shift from the idea of looking at Qigong and saying, oh, well, what can this do for me? And instead, it requires a shift of looking at it as a tradition that moves from one generation to the next to the next. And as it transfers from one, it continues to develop and evolve as a thing unto itself. And so from that perspective, our practice is merely a stopping in point for a tradition that has extended for previously for many, many, many years, and will it continue on beyond the practice of our own selves. So, in other words, part of the internal training of the Qi requires the correct mindset, right? This correct mindset is one that is done in a way that allows our physical body and the physical movements to take the lead. And from that, we engage a mindfulness, a shift from directed thinking to sensing with our mind. And in that shift, then we are able to have a sense of the Qi, its presence, because we can't see it directly, but we can sense it indirectly through these practices. And as we become familiar with it, then we can find ways to develop it and strengthen it. So with all of that theory floating around in our heads, we should probably look at Qigong practice or a Qi training practice that's relevant to this. And so what we will do is we will do a very simple opening and closing posture. This is often done after a standing posture. So for example, something like the standing in a tree position, or in the primordial Qigong, the Hun Yuan Qigong posture, which is here. With any of these postures, there's a variation in terms of how the alignment is presented, but almost universally it is something where we set our weight back over our heels. We find a connection from the ground up through the body, holding the body up, taking the tension out of the shoulders, creating some space through the body, and finding the alignment to the top of the head. And then from there we shift our intent, our attention to our breath, and encourage our breath to become relaxed, even, and full. And by focusing on our breath, this helps to turn the intent inwards and clear the mind of other thoughts. And as we find the comfortable alignment that allows our weight to rest into the heels, relax the low back, and lift the torso upwards, opening across the shoulders, setting the shoulder blades down, extending into the palms, into the bottoms of the feet, into the top of the head. And from there, open and close, we simply bring our hands in front of the lower abdomen, palms facing each other. And as we breathe, just breathing at our own pace, when we breathe in, we allow our arms to move apart. And as we breathe out, we allow our hands to come back towards each other, keeping the breath even, relaxed, and full. Allowing the arms to move in time with the breath. Allowing the intent to expand as we breathe in, and allow the intent to come back as we breathe out. Keep the shoulders relaxed. Keep the wrists and fingers relaxed. Keep the palms extended and open. Allow the weight to settle into the heels. One more time, opening and closing in time with the breath, breathing in. And breathing out. Bringing our feet side by side. And close. I hope this information is helpful for you. Keep training, keep practicing, and take care.